We good?
Yep, we're live.
Thank you. Well, I just want to take the opportunity to welcome everybody to the all staff and library board members to the Middlesex County Library Board meeting of December 12th, 2024 at 3 p.m. And I'd like to especially take the opportunity to welcome our new warden, Brian Roth, who will be a member of our board for this year. And it's good to have you with us, Brian, and looking forward to working with you throughout the year with the library. So with that, I'm going to ask Lindsay to uh, give the acknowledgement, please.
We acknowledge that the land we stand upon today is the traditional territory of the Attawandaron, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Lenape-Wauk peoples who have long-standing relationships to the land, water, and region of southwestern Ontario. The local First Nation communities of this area include Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames First Nation, and Munsee Delaware Nation. We acknowledge the treaties that are specific to this area: Treaty 2 McKee Purchase, Treaty 3 Between the Lakes Purchase, Treaty 6 London Township Purchase, Treaty 21 Longwoods Purchase, and Treaty 29 Huron Tract Purchase. We value the significant contributions both in the past and the present of local and regional First Nations of Turtle Island. We acknowledge historic and ongoing injustices that Indigenous peoples endure in Canada, and we affirm our commitment to honoring Indigenous voices, nations, and cultures, and to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for any disclosure of pecuniary interest or any general nature thereof. Seeing none, we'll move to the minutes of our library board meeting, November 28, 2024. Is there any questions or comments with respect to that? If not, then I look for mover and seconder that the minutes of the November 28th or 26th, 2024 meeting of the library board be approved as presented. Moved by Brad Richards, second by Chair McMillan. Any further discussion on them? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Now we'll move on to our visiting topics. It's the community cupboard project, and we have a presentation by Lee Robinson and from Lucan Library Services and Courtney Jonas from Glencoe Library Service. Go ahead, please.
I can just, before Courtney and Lee get started, we just thought you would be interested to hear more about this project. It's kind of, it's that time of year where there are a lot of like holiday giving programs, and we know, we hear a lot about the use of food banks at this time of year. So this is a project that Lee and Courtney have been working on. For Lee, it's been a couple of years now in the making, kind of going through different phases of this project. So we're excited to have them here to give you a look at the work that they've been doing. And really, this is just for information, and the intent of this project is, to see how it could be expanded. One of the slides does refer to the intent to roll this out into more comprehensive libraries. That's something, that we're looking into to see where this sort of program would fit best, where the need exists. But, really is based on what community resources exist and what kind of gap the library could help to fill. So with that, I'll turn it over to Courtney and Lee.
Okay, thanks so much, Lindsay, and thanks to y'all for having us. So I'm Courtney Joris, the supervisor of the Glencoe and Melbourne libraries, and my colleague Lee Robinson, the Lucan Library supervisor, are just going to present on our community cupboard project. So as Lindsay mentioned, this project came about through the launch of two separate pilot projects at the Lucan and Glencoe libraries. I'm just going to turn it over to Lee now to discuss the cupboard she established in Lucan and its impact so far.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Courtney. So a few years ago, a small emergency food supply was delivered to Lucan by County Social Services after an unhoused individual arrived and identified as hungry. Shortly before COVID, I realized that some of that food had expired and that we were inadvertently gatekeeping those valuable resources. During COVID, many Canadians struggled with food security, and our community was no different. There is a demographic who needs the resources of the food bank, but for whom taking that step is a barrier. For years, the Lucan Library has been providing free fresh produce, and so it seemed natural that we would evolve into offering non-perishable food on an emergency basis as well. I began researching the Little Free Pantry program and other emergency food sources in neighboring counties to identify structural requirements, signage, liability statements, and possible challenges, then planned accordingly. I'm not sure if we should be adjusting or moving along with there. Perfect, thank you. Most fortunately, as this budget had, there was no formal budget for this project, I located a cabinet that met my requirements and was within my spending limit. I took it home, then began the modifications I had determined that would be necessary to modify it for our space. The Lucan Food Cupboard launched in August of 2023 with the initial donation of groceries from a local community member. The cupboard immediately became well used. The Elsie Craig Food Bank, which services our area, visited the branch to offer their support and assistance. The food bank was pleased to see that we had advertised their resources and agreed that an emergency food supply was needed for those yet to take that food bank step. They offered us multiple boxes of food from their own donations to help stock the cupboard until the community took over, ensuring it remained full. We've been operating the cabinet ever since with the ongoing support from the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 540 Lucan, the Elsie Craig and Area Food Bank, the Lucan Lions, an ad hoc food and toy drive by 2 young members of our community, and our patrons. The Lucan Food Cabinet now sees nearly daily usage by our community members in need. And I'll turn it over now to Courtney to discuss the pilot in Glencoe.
Thank you, Lee. So in 2021, Little Free Pantry was proposed and approved as part of the Glencoe Library's Community Reading Garden as a way to help us distribute the fresh produce grown in the raised beds in our garden. As such, it was always imagined as an outdoor resource, something that would be available to the community 24/7. As planning for the garden space continued, I did some research into best practices for these types of resources, discovering some of the practicalities we need to address before moving ahead, such as the legalities around managing anonymous food donations or how to keep things going in extreme weather. We experienced some delays, some of those due to the pandemic. So in the intervening years, I continued doing research and searching for a cupboard that would work best as an outdoor structure. To share our produce in the meantime, we simply placed a crate out in front of the library and filled it every time we did a harvest, and that has been very effective over the years. Then this past summer, we added to the crate by introducing a little cart in the vestibule of the library, which offers those shelf-stable, non-perishable foods, the kinds that we would imagine in a community cupboard. So we've had this cart for around 5 months, and it's been very well used. I provided the initial donation back in August. Because it's a small cart, it didn't take too much to fill out. But since then, it's been sustained well through individual anonymous donations, mostly of canned goods and snack foods. In early November, we were able to move ahead with purchasing our larger permanent structure, which will be placed outside, and it's pictured here on the slide. It's an insulated rabbit hutch that will replace the cart and the crate, so it'll house not only the non-perishable items, but also the produce that we grow in the summer. Moving along, I just wanted to discuss our plans for the future. So we're now looking forward to expanding this project more broadly to support food security across Middlesex County. To do this successfully and sustainably, Liz brought Lee and I together, and as a team, we drafted a plan, carefully considering things such as the purpose of the project, the practical considerations involved in installing and running this type of resource, a strategy for communication, both with potential partners like food banks and service clubs, as well as with the public, and training, policies, and procedures to support staff and our fellow branch supervisors. Okay, could we advance the slide, please? Thank you. So just to begin, the purpose of this project is to address food insecurity at the local level. By installing and maintaining self-serve cupboards filled with shelf-stable food donated by community members on a give what you can, take what you need basis. We are providing low-barrier emergency access to food that may not be possible with existing food banks and meal programs. We are able to do this as libraries because we often have more open hours available than food banks. We can offer some anonymity and discretion, reducing barriers caused by stigma. And we don't have a limitation on how often one can use our services. And there's no identification required to access our spaces. As Lee pointed out, food banks often require identification, and some folks really struggle to take that step. Libraries can also be a more convenient location for those who lack transportation. With these cupboards, we're also filling gaps by partnering with and supplementing existing food banks, not becoming or replacing them. We do this by maintaining only small collections of goods, just enough to fit the cupboards and maybe some extra for replenishment and no more than that, and referring excess donations to the nearest food bank. We also maintain a narrower scope and focus. For example, we'll only accept smaller quantities and refer bulk donations to the food bank. We are also emphasizing that our inventory level is sustained and maintained through a steady flow of giving and taking by community members. So it's really community driven. We're also going to promote the food bank's hours and services and provide clear communication about all of these elements of the cupboards. Our next steps are to use the research and experiences we've gained to expand this project to other branches and support our colleagues during the implementation of their own cupboards. With oversight and guidance from management, we're working collaboratively with supervisors to make some early decisions about how these cupboards could be introduced and maintained in their spaces. These decisions will involve a number of practical considerations about the cupboards themselves, a careful consideration of potential costs, and strategies for promotion, education, and communication with partners and the public, as well as staff and volunteers. So now I'm going to turn it over to Lee to discuss these practical considerations.
Thank you, Courtney. So if we can advance another slide, please. Thank you. So the staffing levels and the amount of open hours suggested that the remaining comprehensive branches, Dorchester, Park Hill, and Strathroy, are most suited to hosting a community cupboard. Comprehensive branches have sufficient space as well as staff and volunteer support to run a cupboard successfully. They also have enough open hours to effectively supplement existing services provided by the food banks. After a recent meeting to introduce the project, the supervisors of Dorchester, Park Hill, and Strathroy are currently in the planning process for expansion to their respective branches. If we could advance again, please. Thank you. So to determine a space specific for the installation of a cupboard in each branch, it'll be helpful to keep in mind a number of practical considerations, which will help guide the supervisors when deciding on the size, style, and placement of their cupboards within their branches. Some of these considerations are: how much physical space is there available to accommodate a cupboard? Is there a location within the branch that will provide easy, discreet access, or will clients be required to walk through the branch? Would a solid or transparent door be preferable? A transparent door allows for discreet viewing of the products within and reduces the possibility of a client having to request the location of a cupboard, while solid doors provide the discretion from those who aren't aware of the cupboards or its purpose. How much sunlight does the location receive? Could the direct sunlight increase the temperature inside a clear-fronted cupboard? Is the cupboard composed of a material that is easily cleaned and disinfected? Does the cupboard meet AODA standards for height requirements? And of course, all cupboards will require the approval of our Director of Library Services. And if we could advance again, please. Thank you. Supervisors may select the size and style of their cupboard, again, subject to approval from Lindsay. Costs may vary widely branch to branch due to the diversity between buildings, communities, and the availability of current community resources. When supervisors are considering acquiring their cupboards, some of the options are purchasing cupboards at low or no cost by approaching service clubs for donation to cover the cost of materials or the costs of the structure, crowdsourcing donations of secondhand items from staff, volunteers, or the broader community at large, purchasing secondhand items from consignment or thrift stores, And if a branch decides to purchase a new cupboard, they must consider that the cost can start at $250 and continue up to as much as $1,000 for a pantry style cupboard. Whether supervisors choose to go with the low or no cost avenue or purchase new, there may be modifications required that affect the cost as well, such as adding legs, plexiglass, or paint. Another option is custom building, which could happen by approaching local carpenters for quotes. Depending on timelines, it may be effective to approach tech departments at local secondary schools to determine if this project could be one for the construction tech classes, with material and expenses to be covered by Middlesex County Library. And another possibility is to reach out to our networks to determine if there are any hobbyists or service clubs that would be willing to donate their labor, again, with material expenses being covered by Middlesex County Library. As with anything, with time and use, future maintenance costs may also be incurred. And now I'll turn it back to Courtney for the promotion and education portion.
Thank you. So promotion and communication efforts should be focused on connecting with food banks, launching the project and introducing it to the public, and providing a shared understanding of what these cupboards are through naming and signage. So first, I'll just discuss connecting with food banks in a little more depth. Both Lee and I are in communication with our branch's nearest food banks. The directors have both responded positively to our projects, sharing great knowledge and experience, and in Lucan's case, donations of food. If comprehensive library supervisors don't have an existing relationship with their food banks, reaching out is recommended wherever feasible, and we'll support them in making that connection if they'd like. In communicating with food banks, we just make sure to emphasize a few points. Our cupboards act as an emergency supplement to food banks. We're intending to fill gaps in the community. Signage is going to appear in the cupboards to promote the food banks and their hours. And if approved or desired by the local food bank, we'll refer excess donations to them. And when it comes to introducing the project to the public and launching it, we both feel it would be ideal to promote a simultaneous launch of all the remaining comprehensive branch cupboards for maximum impact and visibility. If our timeline allows, it would be wise to launch on a day of recognition, such as World Hunger Day, which is May 28th, or during an annual food drive in kind of November, December. We'll be working with the other supervisors to determine a launch date. Having a launch date that coincides with a food drive or day of recognition could present a great opportunity for us to strengthen our connection to our local food banks. As part of the launch, we could host our own food drives, encouraging our communities to donate needed items to those food banks. It's just another way to continue that partnership. So once the timeline's confirmed, then we'd work in consultation with the coordinator of technical services, Amy, on creating a promotional strategy for the cupboards. And finally, providing a shared understanding through naming and signage. So just to make the cupboards easier to maintain, providing a shared understanding and expectation of what the cupboard is and is not is really important. By using a common name for all the cupboards, such as community cupboard, and sharing clear and common signage to communicate expectations, people will begin to recognize exactly what the cupboards are. And over time, this awareness will encourage both use and donation within the scope that we're intending. And that signage will be created and approved by the coordinator of technical services. Examples of what that will include are a very simple take what you need, leave what you can statement to sum up how the cupboard works, a sign directing folks to donate to their local food bank if the cupboard is full, a liability statement, and a poster promoting the nearest food bank with their hours listed, as we mentioned earlier. Could we advance the slide one more time, please? Thanks. So staff and volunteer education is another important piece to this. So we're now discussing procedures to address concerns and questions that may arise during the operation of these cupboards. Some examples include the question of which items can or cannot be accepted, such as homemade, expired, unsealed, dented items, medicines, herbal supplements, bulk items, things that might not fit in the unit, where to recommend overflow items be donated. We'd like to have a policy for specific situations related to usage, such as children utilizing the cupboard and snacking in the library. We want to address questions like how often is the cupboard checked and restocked by staff or volunteers? And how do we reduce waste? When items expire, what do we do with them? So as they mentioned, supervisors with community cupboards or who will be implementing community cupboards, we plan to meet regularly via Zoom to collaborate and support each other. Currently, we've met with the Strathroy, Dorchester, and Park Hill supervisors as a group and followed up individually via email. And all are planning to move forward with their own cupboards. So we're now in the early planning process with each of them, starting discussions like placement in the branch or procedures for staff for specific situations. So just trying to help everybody be as prepared as possible. And then that last way we can support in an ongoing way is just to be available to provide that experience-based help as requested. So this concludes our presentation about the Community Cupboard project. So if there are any thoughts or questions, we're here for them.
Okay, open it up for any questions. I've got one maybe more or less to Lee, if you could. I noticed when we did the tour of the branches last year, it was in the infancy kind of the cupboard, and I never saw it before. I never saw it operated in a branch, so I was pleased to see it. But how often is it used? Like, I guess what I'm looking at is at what frequency is it used?
I can easily say it's used daily. So most of the time it's smaller items that are gone, like a small amount of items that have gone, have been utilized. But yes, we are filling it pretty much daily, I would say.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
because that with not knowing, it's not in my local branch, so I don't see it. But with not knowing, there's nobody to ask, so I thought I'd just get that answer direct from you, and I appreciate that. The other thing I was going to ask, and then I'll look for other questions, but with the community involvement, I noticed you mentioned your Lions and all the other ones for I'm going to say stocking the community cupboard. Do they bring? Is the idea is they bring items in? Is that how that works, or do they say what do you need and they'll get them for you? I guess I'm trying to understand how that works.
So initially, the Legion was supplying us with gift cards, which our volunteer is going and purchasing things with that. The Lions also have reached out and said that if we need anything, that they are more than willing to run a food drive for us to supply that. And we really appreciate that as well. And then also the same with the young boys that have for several years now hosted a toy and food drive. They also brought in some donations as well. So it's really been a wonderful experience. As is with most small towns, a lot of the people are members of all sorts of different organizations. So the word has really spread in that regard as well. So it's been good in that way.
Thank you. Is there any questions from the library board or any staff members with respect to this presentation? I'll go with I've got Brad Richardson and Ruth Adams. Brad,
Thanks,
go
Chair.
ahead.
Lee, I've had the chance to be up there a few times since you're a great library there and had a few meetings there. But like everything that's good, there's always potentially a bad item. And is there anything that you guys run into that you didn't expect?
No, actually, we've done a lot of contemplation about this and tried to do enough research that we might be aware of what would happen. We have had some expired food, so we do keep an eye on that to ensure that that's not spread. So initially I was taking photographs of the food cabinet as I left during the day, and then would reflect on that in the morning when I returned, just to make sure if there was something different, I was checking it. But we've done really well as far as that goes. As I said, there was the expired food, but that's about the only thing. I think we had one broken jar that happened. But it's been really great. It's been surprisingly great. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think if I can just interject there, that's a really important question to ask. And I know there were a couple sessions at the OLA conference back in January that talked about community fridges and different like food bank style operations out of libraries. And they kind of identified some of those challenges and pitfalls. And I think that what Lee and Courtney have really focused on is making sure that the scale of this program really matches what's feasible in our branches and what's within our capacity. Because especially some of those fridge programs and like relying on maybe handing over too much control to an outside group of volunteers can be very challenging. So I think that Lee and Courtney have made really smart decisions about what the library can take on, what need we can meet, filling that gap, but not trying to get too big too fast when you can end up with some of those bigger challenges.
Ruth Adams, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I was wondering, you mentioned a policy for situations such as children utilizing the cupboard. What's your policy?
So we're still in talks with the other supervisors about this. It's something that comes up. I guess people are worried about somebody monopolizing the cupboard, cleaning it out and not, spreading the resources. So I looked a lot to the Little Free Pantry movement because they've been doing this in communities for many years. And the general consensus is just not to really control that too much. It's okay if kids use it. It's okay if they snack in the library. My thought is if it becomes an issue of this cupboards being cleaned out, maybe it's a situation where we help to curate the contents a little more. So we have a mix of snack foods and meal type foods. There's lots of brainstorming we can do around that. But generally, we just want it to be accessible to everybody and feel like everybody's got a right to use it. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Are there any other questions from any library board members or staff? I've got one, so with the implementation, where are we with the implementation? You talked about the comprehensive libraries. I know there's 2 now that have them, but are you looking for to move them forward with the other ones? Is that the objective? Or maybe Lindsay can answer this. Where are we in the pecking order for, say, Park Hill or something for that? Is it moving, or is it just because I noticed we received this for information purposes, this report, but maybe just give us an idea. I haven't heard any discussion of it farther than that.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, as Courtney pointed out, they have had conversations. I apologize, my dogs are barking like crazy in the background. I hope you can't hear them. They have had conversations with Dorchester, Park Hill, and Strathroy supervisors, and those supervisors are, interested in moving ahead. So I think that the step that they then have to take is making those connections with their local organizations, like the food bank in Dorchester, in Strathroy as well, and making sure that whatever system that they're thinking of makes sense for their community. And then I think the next phase would be, is it possible in some of our enhanced level branches, thinking about where the need is as well, kind of again filling those gaps, but it tends to be easiest to start at our biggest branches when there's a bit more space and more staff to help with these projects.
Okay, good, thank you. Is there any other questions then? So just to reiterate a little bit, then the comprehensive library, the ones running it, or I don't know the right terminology, but the manager of the branch, they would be speaking with the local food bank, who looks at the local food bank, to make sure that this isn't stepping out of line or on anybody's toes, or that everything can run smooth, and getting kind of the blessing from the food bank to make sure that'll work cohesively together.
Exactly. And it really is, I think we see the library as kind of bridging any gap that might exist. And maybe those gaps don't exist, right? Maybe everyone in, like in Dorchester is, everyone who needs to is being connected to the food bank. But I think how these cupboards can function is They're in the library, they're in a neutral, safe space. When Lee sees someone using the cupboard regularly, that's an opportunity to have a conversation and to say, this is what our service can do for you, and you're welcome to use it at any time. But these are, the next level of services that are available in the community, and helping someone recognize what's out there and kind of removing that fear and that stigma, and making that connection. So definitely not competing with any organization that already exists, really just complementing them and hopefully connecting more people with the food banks and any other community organization that can help.
Thank you. Are there any other questions then with respect to this report that was presented? Okay, then seeing none, I want to thank Lee and Courtney for this presentation, and I'm going to look for a mover and a seconder that the community cupboard project presentation be received for information. Please. Don't be shy. Moved by Ruth Adams, seconded by I gotta apologize, but I don't see I know she's on here, but I don't see the mayor on my screen.
It may just be your view. Sometimes there's an arrow that you can see to kind of expand your view, but Sharon is seconding the motion. I can see it.
Okay, that's good then. Then seconded by Sharon, Councillor McMillan. Any further comments or questions? All in favor? It's carried. Thank you, Lindsay. Now we'll move on to the strategic planning staffing feedback exercise presented by Lindsay Brock. Lindsay?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So let me just organize my screen here. Sorry. The presentation before you is the result of a staff development day that we held back in November, so November 21st. Library staff participated in some training in the morning on having difficult conversations, and then in the afternoon we did some activities, and one of those was this strategic planning kind of brainstorming session. So Rebecca, if you can scroll to that next slide there. Everyone divided up into small groups, and they rotated through 6 stations where I'd kind of broken the strategic plan and a couple elements of the planning process into those 6 stations each, and feedback was provided on Post-it notes, and many staff communicated that they appreciated that opportunity to learn more about the current plan, and then to also share ideas on how to improve, or what changes they would like to see for the next strategic plan. Next slide there. So our first station, sorry, I'll just backtrack a little bit. So I wanted to bring this information to you, to the board, because I felt it'd be useful for you to hear from staff. You don't have a lot of opportunities to hear directly from branch staff. You hear from me regularly, but hearing from our staff in their own words, I thought would be really valuable. So their feedback, along with information that'll come from our community survey that will be running in the month of January, this will help inform our refreshed strategic plan that will come back to you with that, basically draft version at the March meeting. And perhaps these thoughts that we're going to discuss, go over in this presentation, might start some conversations amongst you, or spur some thoughts that you want to share with the board members or with me at any time, about what it's information. A lot of this information might be specific to some branches or some staff's experience, but I think it can help inform those broader priorities that the library will be focusing on. In terms of next steps after for myself and for our management team, we're going to use this feedback to create a series of staff surveys to try to get really more information about some of the concerns or requests that you'll see in these slides, to better understand what is or isn't happening, both at the branch level as well as at the system level. This is great information, but a lot of the points we need to know more. We need some more specifics, and we need to know a bit more context. So this was a great first start to get people thinking and sharing their thoughts. But we know we'd like to see this, kind of be the first survey of staff, and then move on to a number of surveys and kind of engagement sessions over the next few years. So our first station that I set up was on our mission and mandate. I included the language that's on the slide and prompts that staff had to think about. So what do you like about the mission and mandate? What don't you like? And how do these statements need to change? And so then the next slide includes the staff feedback. So some staff feedback that was shared, some people really liked the action words of the plan, while others thought that maybe, it was a bit too buzzwordy. It didn't necessarily speak to, their work and feel like the work that they do every day. Some of the language that they thought could be added would be around safety, inclusion, welcoming, support, maybe referring to specific groups that the library serves, a statement about ages, diverse demographics, suggesting that the library is more than just a space, making sure that our mission and mandate refer to the library as a welcoming community space. Next slide. So the next station had talked about our strategic focus number 1. So that strategic focus is reimagine what the library has to offer, and then the objectives are listed there. So the prompts, the questions asked of staff were, what do you like and not like about this strategic focus and the objectives? What do these objectives say to the community that we serve? Is this strategic focus still relevant? Why or why not? Next slide. So some of the staff feedback. So some pointed out, made a comment about who are we not serving, and making sure we keep that in mind when we think about our objectives and how we imagine, how we communicate what the library has to offer. I feel that the focus should definitely communicate that we are ever evolving, and that we encompass a wealth of knowledge, ideally. A common comment across a number of these stations spoke to training and development. So staff skills needing to be expanded, opportunities for staff to learn new skills, and also, making sure that everyone knows that staff have a certain number of professional development hours every year, and that those can be kind of self-guided hours that they can use about topics that they'd like to use in their daily work. There was a comment about barriers to access, and one of those being fines, and that's something that we're going to discuss more in 2025, so that seemed very timely. Another common theme was promotion and communications and marketing, and about how the importance of needing to increase awareness of what the libraries do and how they can help people. The potential to allocate more resources for networking and developing those community partnerships, how to reach non-users, and then referring to innovation. And within that strategic focus, we talk about advancing leading edge practices and ideas, ensuring that the library is a dynamic community destination, ensuring that is fully in place and that staff are well trained and well supported before then increasing awareness about it. So those were some interesting comments about that strategic focus. Next slide. The second strategic focus there is enrich the lives of Middlesex County residents. Prompts, again, the same as the last slide. So what do you like? What do these objectives say? Is this still relevant to the work that we do? Next slide. Lots of staff feedback about technology. The fact that there is still that barrier to access with some residents in terms of perhaps the thought that we can't focus so much on digital collections and e-resources and things like that if that then leaves behind people who don't have internet access at home. So about how do we kind of make that fine balance between still supporting use of technology and encouraging that while still meeting the needs of our users who may feel left behind by, due to connectivity issues. Staffing, some comments came up about in terms of staffing resources. Again, training and assistance, allocating hours to, allowing staff to provide that technology assistance. And then again, comments about training, staff knowledge, training gaps. All staff should have the same onboarding or updated tech training. And so, these are programs that we have in place. We have a standard onboarding process. And one of our wish list projects is working on competencies, particularly those that relate to technology. So some of these comments just identify, maybe there's some gaps in how these things are being communicated to staff, right? We know that there are plans and systems in place kind of behind the scenes, but perhaps not all the, the same information is reaching all branch staff. So that was some really important feedback that we heard. Notes about inclusion and diversity came up within this strategic focus. And so staff noted that we need to consider how to be inclusive. Simply stating it as a mission does not make it inclusive, right? It's not just buzzwords and words on paper. We have to be putting the work behind it. Need more diversity in our library staff to be even more inclusive. So that was those were some really interesting comments. Accessibility, because within that strategic focus, one of the objectives is we will further develop our services and programs to be inclusive, accessible, and welcoming to all members of our communities. And it was pointed out that not all branches are fully accessible. And even those that are accessible, there may still be challenges. And those are things that we need to look at. So there was the note that staff need greater training on accessibility to accommodate unique needs. The potential to provide staff with optional training to engage with different communities. So training such as, that related to ESL, ASL, serving neurodiverse patrons. A lot of good feedback there. And then another comment that came up at a few of the stations was referring to how our communities are growing and changing, and keeping in mind the uniqueness of our communities, right? There's quite a bit of variation across our 15 branches. And I think, we heard from staff saying that, of course, we think that these plans can be really valuable, but the plan needs to be applicable, meet the needs of our unique communities as well. And so I think that's, one of the challenges that we have, obviously, is creating a plan that has strategies and objectives that are broad enough that can be applied in unique ways to meet the different needs of all of our communities. Next slide. Strategic focus number 3 there, turn outward and make connections. So the same prompting questions there. Next slide. I think we had 2 pages of feedback on this station, so it started some really good conversation. So there was a comment that there's a bit of a disconnect between this strategic focus and what is perhaps happening in some branches, or this is based on someone's experience. Emphasizing that we're nothing without our patrons, and we need to make them aware of our services and reach out to them. So again, that goes back to communication, how we are marketing our services and communicating those things to the public. There could be some improvements there. The desire for communication tools, maybe more focus on social media and community-based online media posts geared to teens. So some of these things are definitely more challenging to accomplish than others when, community-based media outlets are unfortunately shrinking. We don't have as many options as we did in the past. Social media is a really powerful tool, but it's, there's a limit to how much content we can put out on our social media channels, and then get the, the level of engagement that we're looking for back. Because, best practices for social media says, don't put more than 2 to 3 posts a day on your account, and focus on engagement rather than just informing. So it's complicated work, and could use a lot of resources to focus on that. But how do we scale that for our current system? What sort of opportunities do we have within our current staffing model? So there's some good points there, but definitely some challenging comments to try to implement. Conversations about outreach to schools, events, arenas, making new connections beyond kind of those standard community connections that our staff might have in outside of their branches. And then again, like I said earlier, recognizing that every community has different needs. So our focus needs to be more broad while still being able to serve each community. So making sure that every branch and every community can see themselves in our strategic plan and our strategic objectives. Next slide. Again, more feedback on that strategic focus. So the desire for more training. Ideally, staff would love to see more community navigator positions around the county to help, connect people to those resources. The comment that someone likes the community hub aspect, but it blurs the lines. So library staff, some might feel that they're expected to know everything and need more training. And that's a really hard challenge, I think, for staff to navigate. We can sometimes feel like we have to, we're responsible for a wide variety of services and challenges, in our branches, but we aren't the experts at everything. We aren't social workers. We are community connectors. And so I think that this point shows me that, there needs to be, I think, maybe more communication with staff about what that looks like, right? Like, where are the boundaries? What are the expectations? What's reasonable? And what supports the staff need to help make those connections, recognizing that we can't solve every problem, but we know we're an important part of that overall social safety net that's really so needed in our communities. Someone pointed out that we are more relevant now more than ever, which is absolutely true. But that there is that need for expanding connections within the community. Next slide. Next, we looked at library values. So values are principles or standards of behavior that guide how an organization works. And a value statement can describe a set of ideals and guiding principles, the enduring character of the organization, and the broadly held personal core values of staff and management. So the prompts were, what are the values that describe the work you do at your branch? Are there different values that you would use to describe the library? And what do the values you have identified say to the community that we serve? Next slide. So we got a nice chart together of some of these words that maybe speak more closely to what library staff see their work as. There was that earlier comment about buzzwords not necessarily representing what we do in our branches. So I think there's a lot of good language here that we can use, pull from when we refresh our strategic plan. So fun, entertaining, engagement, free, approachable, welcoming, the importance of greeting everyone. A lot of good feedback there. Next slide. And then some of the other comments about library values, again, pointing to diversity, that there's some work to do to improve our work on diversity and equity and inclusion. How do we share community uniqueness? Again, that speaks to a point that has been made a couple times. Branches are all different and they can't be put in the same box. different levels of service, different relationships. So I think that points to how we need to choose our language carefully, so that all branches can see themselves in this plan. But a really good point at the end there, libraries may have different values than our communities, but we have to keep in mind that we need to keep some of those. So I think that speaks to those overarching library values like free access to information and, kind of libraries being kind of that neutral space where you can find information about two sides to a situation or an argument. It might speak to our work with drag storytime programs. There were people in the community who felt that didn't represent them and their values, but it was an important program for the library to pursue, based on our values of equity and diversity and inclusion. And so I think that this point speaks to a lot of the work that we do. Next slide. So next we had strategic goals and initiatives. So strategic goals directly identify what an organization sees as the outcome of their business efforts. What does the organization ultimately want to achieve? And strategic initiatives are the projects and programs outside of those day-to-day activities that are designed to achieve the identified goals. So prompts here were, what should the library's biggest priorities be for the next 5 years? What are the key projects that we'll need to complete to achieve those priorities? And what resources will we need to help? What will we need to help achieve those? Next slide. So feedback, freedom to read, that felt like a priority for some staff. Reimagining what the library offers. So thinking about different things that the library could lend or different services that we could provide. And obviously more training and more money are always needed when we're trying something new. Thinking about new and upcoming apps, making sure that staff are prepared to use those and help others use them. Combating misinformation proactively. So again, that information literacy, which we've talked about before, and how that needs to be a priority for libraries. Some more challenging, also challenging things like more study rooms. Of course, we would love unlimited space. That's more possible in some branches than others. Prioritizing digital resources, prioritizing promotional plans. So again, speaking to that communication theme. And then thinking about, if staff could ask for anything, what sort of staffing resources would they ask for? So again, someone focused on communication, social media, and different ways to communicate our services and programs. Next slide. So more feedback, the desire for more time. So this came up on a few of the stations, was, thinking about what resources are needed to, what resources do staff need, and more staff time was one of those comments. So obviously, that can be challenging with, working out a staffing budget, but it's helpful feedback so that we can step back and say, well, what could we be doing differently, so that even if we can't allocate an unlimited number of hours to a new project or an existing service, what could change within day-to-day operations, schedules, things like that, to give staff a little more time to focus on certain tasks and projects. The idea of pursuing grants for these projects. So that's something that we do already, but it might not be for kind of branch-driven projects. It's usually for something that is kind of motivated, it's a project that started kind of centrally versus a branch project. So, is this an opportunity to look at some projects or initiatives that branch staff, have come up with, and pursue different opportunities for funding for those projects. Outreach, talked about that on a few of the slides. For the library to endure in today's environment, The public needs to realize and appreciate all current and future services. So many people think that the library is irrelevant because they don't know our resources. And I mean, I would argue that a lot of people do understand our services and resources, and our traffic, reflects that. Our statistics reflect, that our usage has really rebounded since the pandemic. But I think we're always striving for more. We want to, we want to reach everyone. We know how much we can help everyone. And so it can be frustrating when, when we hear from people who don't understand what the library can do for them. So it's always something that we want to improve on. Comments about staff security and staff retention there, and as well expanding service for seniors and targeting the needs of an aging population. So a lot of good comments. Next slide. So a lot of great feedback, but a few kind of overarching themes that we can stream all of it into. So in terms of when staff were kind of thinking internally and about, processes and resources, the need for training and support, the importance of communications, and those staffing resources. Those were some themes that we identified. And then when staff were kind of looking externally, looking to, users and communities, making community connections, opportunities for different ways of delivering services, the importance of technology and how that can vary community to community, valuing partnerships and, putting some more resources behind how we build those and strengthen them. And that ties in with outreach as well. So next steps will be, like I said, our community and partner survey that we're just finalizing, and that'll come out for the month of January. And then we will do that, kind of pooling all of our data together to see what trends and what similarities exist, and how we formulate that into a plan. And so then we'll come back to you in March with that refreshed, updated plan for your first look at it. And I know I've spewed a lot of information at you, but I'm happy to answer any questions or help with any conversation you wanted to have.
Yeah, I'm gonna look for questions, but did you get all this done in one day?
They did all of this brainstorming in, I think it was an hour. Like it was intense.
Wow, that's unreal. But I look at it all, and and I looked at when we discussed the strategic plans and how we're moving forward, and and I see one of them in there to remove that enhancing lives, and I know there's a lot of discussion when that was put in the first place. But where do we go with this now? Like we've got it, and I see that you want to get the community input and then bring it back for like a March meeting. But where do we go with all that we've collected here now? That that it's they have to everybody has to realize that everything's financially sensitive too, and budget wise, and even training. So how does this move forward now? Not to just take this and put it on a shelf. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, this is where it comes back, to us on the staff side, where we analyze the responses and see what kind of common themes jump out at us and how they relate to our current plan. And what are some of those common requests, maybe gaps, challenges that we think we need to prioritize, right? And because this next plan can only cover, a 4-year spread. So it's not, we have to be reasonable, exactly like you said, Mr. Chair, right? Thinking within the budget that we have, the resources that we have, what our mandate is as a library, and think about what the next 4 years can look like and what we need to focus on, thinking about our internal kind of staffing needs and, things that we need to accomplish. And then what are some reasonable expectations to set for the coming 4 years. But then a big piece of this is going to be that communication with staff and involving them more, I think, think, in this this new plan versus kind of previous strategic plans, where it's been a tool that we've used behind the scenes more so, but hasn't necessarily made that connection with staff as strongly as we'd like to see. So that's really going to be a priority moving forward.
Thank you. I'm going to open up any discussion or any questions with respect to this report. It's fairly detailed, and it took some time to go through it in the first place, but I just look for any questions that you have for Lindsay with respect to what's been presented to us. I'll go to the warden. Brian?
Thank you. I'm very new to this, obviously, but Lindsay, have you, I'm sure you have, into the clientele that you have coming to the library? Like, I see, I'll use Park Hill as an example. It's very much a hub to people of, how shall I say it, meager means. They use the library a lot. And that's where I just want to say to that idea with the food program and stuff, I think that's a great program to the people that come. And I'm talking about during the day, during the working hours. We do see that a lot. And I just wonder if that's kind of across the board, or is that mainly because of like a Park Hill where the people are living?
I think that it really exists everywhere, those needs, just, at different levels, right? And, but I think, more and more, especially over the last 4 or 5 years, right? Things have really changed in a lot of areas. We are incorporating like demographic information into our community survey, so we can get a bit more, some data besides what we observe, to understand who is using our libraries, and exactly so that we can support these ideas that really start at the branch level, like the community cupboard project, that can have such a big impact, meeting some of those needs.
Thank you.
Yes, is there any other questions then with respect to this? Seeing none, then I would look for a mover and seconder that's a strategic planning staff feedback exercise presented be received for information.
So moved. Me, Mary Gay.
Whoa.
I know, I finally got on. I'm sorry about that.
Royalty has joined us. Moved by Mary Gay, seconded by Brad Richards. Further comments? All in favor? That's carried. I will say I enjoyed reading that report because there's a lot of different perspectives. Not being a staff member, you don't usually see, and I like the honesty and the frankness with the report. So thank you, Lindsay. And it's going to be good to see that move forward. Now, item 5 is action items, and there are no action items. So then we'll move down to item 6, which is correspondence and information items, and the library activity report 6A. Lindsay, you want to speak with that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple points there, because it hasn't been that long since our November meeting. So we did get confirmation about the funds raised through the Dorchester Tim Hortons Holiday Smile Cookie campaign. So the library will receive $2,501 from that campaign, which is fantastic. And we're really grateful for this support and going to be using it to refresh some of the items in the creative space there at the Dorchester branch. Some items about health and safety training that we're completing. So a number of library staff are right now doing their first aid training. So there's an online portion and then an in-person training that's scheduled next week. And then Bettina will be helping to refresh all of our memories about prepare training that we took a number of years ago. That's nonviolent crisis intervention, so like de-escalation training that's really helpful for library work. The Canada Post strike continues, so I just wanted to make you aware that it does impact some library services. So we had paused our interlibrary loan service. That's where we send books to other library systems and receive them. So that has been paused provincially. And then we have paused our books by mail service. So the service for those patrons who can't physically visit the library, but we're working with long-term care homes and residences to support those users of that service who live in those spaces to make sure that they're still accessing books. And we're going to really, I'm going to have a discussion tomorrow about, how our delivery service can help potentially make some deliveries to help make sure people have some books over the Christmas season. So we're working on that. And then just a few programs that I wanted to point out. So there was the Red Scarf Project that Coldstream Branch participated in. Glencoe Library has a seniors health and wellness program for their ongoing seniors library lounge program. And Winter Boredom Busters at the Ilderton branch. A number of our branches are running some of those programs over the winter break for families to participate in. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Is there any question with respect to that report? If not, then we move on to early on December 2024 calendar. I'm going to ask, is there any questions with respect to correspondence and information item 6A or B? Seeing none, then I look for a motion, a mover and seconder that items 6A and B be received for information. Moved by Sharon McMillan and it's seconded by Ruth Adams. For the comments, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Any inquiries? Under new business, I'd like to bring up something that that's okay. I don't know. I'm trying to think of the right method to discuss it, but Lindsay and I were speaking at the just prior to the warden's election with respect to our December meetings. We talked about what happened this year with the warden swearing in, moving from Thursday to the Tuesday, and it hit our date. And when you look at our calendar, for example, this year we had a meeting in on December, or sorry, in November, the end of November, and then we had the next one on December the 12th, and scheduled for December the 9th. And our next meeting next year is January the 14th. So what we were wondering, we were discussing if it's anybody have an objection to asking Lindsay to look at possibly maybe having one in June, because we got a 3-month period without one this year, and not having one in December because we'd have at the end of November of 2025, and then early January. We have to have it early January because of the conference that comes up the end of January. So I'm throwing that out there with an idea that Lindsay could possibly bring back a report in January that would at least say whether it's feasible to do that instead of kind of ending up with 3 meetings like boom, boom, boom. So, and this would, if we moved one and put one in June, for example, and there's another one that's open, I think it's April, but at least that way we'd still meet the requirements of having the number of meetings we need a year. So it was just a thought with try to spread it out a little more evenly throughout the year. You have any comment on that, Lindsay, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I did check with Marcy, and of course it's absolutely possible. So yeah, I just wanted to point out that it could be either adding a meeting in April or adding that meeting in June. Yeah.
So then what do we do? You need a motion to ask you to do that, or are we just going to bring it back as a report, request a report for our January meeting?
I think maybe if you wanted to make a motion, and then we could just work with Marcy on, because I think she has to change a meeting through county council maybe. So at the same time, she can put this through as well.
Right. Yeah. So it would just be the morning of the council meeting, like we usually do, but it would be one of them in either April or June.
And is there one that the group prefers, April over June or vice versa? That would be helpful because you could make a decision now probably.
Well, if I had my druthers, I'd prefer April because June you're getting into holidays, that's all. And the other thing is that you think about staff holidays too that come in there to play. But I mean, I'll turn it up back to the board. It's just, I'm just making a comment here and I just want to know whether I got support or whether I don't.
I think Mary
Jim?
Jane has a question.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you,
Okay.
Lindsay. Yeah, just a comment. Lindsay, what are the meeting dates now? Just, I know the fall ones, but the first of the year. January,
So
then what comes March?
January, March, May, September, October, November, December.
Okay, just a comment from me, and I may be the only one. It just seems from the last meeting we have in May, is it then, Lindsay, you said, to September, there's such a huge span, and then we have a couple of really big meetings. So, packed agendas, but that's just a comment that I have, and I'm only one vote. So I'm good. I'm game for anything, honestly.
Ruth Ann.
Yes, actually, I agree with Mary Gay. I think I'd prefer June too. So that there's not such a long period between May and September.
Yep. I'll go on record as agreeing with you both. So then I just would the motion be something to the effect that we request the Lindsay, our CEO, to for the library to move our eliminate the December meeting, but have one in June.
That sounds great. Yeah.
Can I get somebody to make that motion, or moved by Brad, seconded by Mary Gay?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay. So we're all good with that then? Okay, all in favor? It's carried. Thank you. I just I think it makes it easier than us trying to jam up December and January and the end of November all at once. And if we get the similar problem next year, at least we're not scrambling. Okay. Is there anything else under new business? Oh, I'm sorry, new business. We got our next meetings is January the 14th, March 25th, and May 27th. So okay, seeing nothing else, and I would on bylaws, I look for a motion at 9A, the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the December 12th meeting of the library board. I look for a mover and seconder for first and second reading. Moved by Mary Gay, seconded by Ruth Adams. All in favor? That's carried. I looked at the bylaw be given a third and final reading. Moved by Brad, seconded by Sharon. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. There was no other business, then I look for item 10, adjournment. Please, mover and seconder. Moved by Ruth Adams, seconded by Mary Gay. Further comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. With that, completed. And Brian's still here? Well, yeah, okay. This getting